You are on. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All me. I was the Democratic nominee in 2010 against John Micah. And through that process, I learned a great deal about this thing we call Congress. And that has led me to decide to run again. The district's a little bluer than it's ever been. It's changed, got a little shorter and fatter. We have now 4 counties, all of St. John's, all of Flagler, and about half of Putnam and half of Volusia. And what I learned in 2010 is that really the conversation at that time was all about jobs. And in 2012 and the following Congresses, probably the next 5 or 6 years, is all going to be really about the economy. The truth is we don't need 9 million new jobs. We need whole new industries and 9 million small businesses. We are at a window of opportunity, and I think they call them windows of opportunity because they open and close quickly. And this race is just about that for the entire country, not just this district. We thought it was about jobs. In 2010, really for the last decade, we've thought it was about jobs. But I believe this is not a recession. This is a changing economy. And I think you have only to look at the fact that we did all the tried and true things that you do during a recession, that we've always done in the 20th century to correct recessions. We did all of those. We did stimulus. We did bailouts. We did all of the things that have worked in the past, and they're not working. We did a jobs plan. It's not working. And I think that that proves my hypothesis that this is a changing economy and that we have a very small window of opportunity to send people to Congress who are willing to have very complicated and very tough conversations across the American spectrum, whether it's the economy or education or healthcare, access to healthcare, all of those things. We have the opportunity to get ahead of those conversations and resume our position as a world leader in this new 21st century economy.
Cool.
Is that 2 minutes?
You get more all you want. You get all you want for this part.
Okay.
So let me ask the question, as we kind of kidded earlier, what were you thinking? You know, why are you running? I understand that part of it, but you mentioned more of that in your narrative. Could you expand on Washington failing us, not the America it used to be?
Well, first off, let me say I was not planning on running. You know, as we talked about earlier, you know, my husband's being deployed to Afghanistan, and so Florida was very late getting the maps out, and you know, until we realized what the maps would look like and that Congressman Micah was going to run in a different seat, leaving this seat open, one of the 2 open seats that Florida got due to our population growth. I just really was thinking 2012 was not going to be a good fit in this situation. I'm not a self-funder, so to have such late maps, you know, puts somebody who has to raise money behind the 8 ball. But I talked to my husband about it at length. Obviously, I don't want to do anything that causes him any concern. I want him to be focused on what he needs to be focused on and come home to us. So, you know, we had a lot of conversations about it, and ultimately he and my daughters kind of came and said, but how could you not? How could you not? Because I'm a Navy veteran, and I joined as the bombs rained down in Operation Desert Storm, and he joined as a result of the towers coming down, the Army, my husband did. And so really our history as a family is that when we feel like the country is in need and we can be of service, we answer that call. And that's just kind of what he said to me, and it was true. So I guess the answer is, how could I not?
Cool. You talk about the stimulus package, the incentives that didn't work. What would you propose that you believe will work?
Well, we're sitting on 1,000 Saudi Arabias in natural gas. So there are some very true things that I think we know about this new economy. And one of which is the country that figures this energy out, how we consume energy, how we get it safely out of the ground, how we create renewable energy. Hello. Sure. The country that figures that out will dominate the globe economically. And I believe that we have an opportunity to not only protect ourselves from a homeland security point of view by harnessing our own American energy. Love for it to be green and renewable, but American at a minimum. That protects us, but it also makes us prosperous. And because of what we have, what we know, just what we know in natural gas under the United States of America, we could literally be energy exporters for the rest of the world. And that changes everything. And it's pretty simple. I mean, I know there's obviously lots of technological advances that need to happen to harness natural gas. But really, the president, whether it's this president or any other president, could, with the stroke of a pen, say every federal fleet is going to operate on natural gas by 2015, 2020, whatever the date is. And that would create an industry the size of the coffee industry. The jobs, the research, the development, the cottage industries, the prosperity and the safety would change the world and certainly change America and put us back on equal footing as far as our economic prosperity in the 21st century.
Along those lines, one of the, obviously, at least in the federal presidential race, is the Keystone Pipeline question. Tying into that, is that something you think the U.S. should be doing?
Well, I mean, I think it's a false choice, right? I mean, the conversation should not be dragging Canadian fuel down through the center of the United States. It should be, where's our own fuel? I see it as a false choice. I understand the job creation that is associated with it, but it's not forever jobs. It's building jobs, and that pipeline will get built, and those jobs will go away. And so I would rather have conversations about American energy and forever jobs from now into the foreseeable future. Cool. I've got 2 daughters that need to grow up and pay rent and take care of me when I'm old. So I want to talk about American forever jobs.
Okay, let me move to another topic. You talked about that it's not just about the jobs, but it's about the need for whole new industries and thousands of businesses. Talk about your views on the development and the how America would go about encouraging the growth of the various industries, whatever they might be, or the new businesses. What are your views?
Well, I mean, we know, right? We know fuel. We know energy is mandatory for a modern society. So we know that the country who dominates that, who unlocks that, will dominate the globe. And that we'll all be kind of at their beck and call, at their whim, because we need it. We can't go without it. So I'd like it to be us. I think that's an important mission for Congress, to figure out how to make sure that's America. But there's other things we know too, right? We know how many people are being born. We know the aging of America. We know the aging of the youth of the rest of the world. So there's other things that are equally as important: biomedicine, all of the things associated with health and our personal health, but also the health of our earth. I'm running against 8 self-avowed Tea Party Republicans who think that it is now time to end the federal government because some aspects of the federal government have problems. I think that's wrong thinking, and I think that not only, I mean, they want to go back to Ronald Reagan days. I think something like that takes us back more likely to the 1920s. But I don't think is the time to end our clean air and our clean water. This is America. We don't want to be a third world country. We want we want to have innovative industries that lead to a better life and a better country for all of us to enjoy.
I'll keep asking. Nobody's going to jump. What are your views? One of the more controversial issues of late, national headlines, immigration policy, the Arizona immigration or naturalization laws, Alabama, the federal government's mandates on that type of thing. What are your views on what should America's stance be on immigration reform?
Well, you know, I was on the record very strongly in 2010 talking about the fact that we have to address the carrot, that there are employers who knowingly hire people who are not here legally, and they make significant amounts of profit off of the back of those people. So unless and until you address the carrot and put some teeth in that legislation, I talked about a 1-to-1 ratio. If you are found hiring illegal immigrants knowingly, that it should be for every penny you put out in payroll, you get fined. So 1-to-1 ratio. So I think that is absolutely the most important thing we can do. But I will say that this cantankerous conversation, this kind of unwelcoming conversation that we're having, is shocking. We're all immigrants to America, so it's disturbing, and it doesn't lend itself to any kind of national unity or prosperity in the future at all.
There are some that would say, if you're in the country illegally, go back, send them back. America should do this, and some of your opponents have expressed that. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us about what do you think about the DREAM Act? What are your views of that type of legislation that allows those, or under what conditions should they stay? Under what conditions should they go? Could you elaborate, be more?
Well, I think there's a difference between undocumented families that are here and people who are here to do us harm, people who are here illegally to do us harm. So let's separate those apart, and I think, you know, it goes without saying that any thinking person would agree that if somebody's here illegally, maliciously, then yes, that's a different kind of border security conversation than people who have come here and overstayed a visa or whatever. The DREAM Act, I think, how far back? If we're going to talk about the sins of the father, right, and making children pay for something that they had no control over, how far back? Are you positive your ancestors were here legally? No. Right. So I mean, you know, those are legislation isn't a scalpel. It's a blunt instrument. So at some point you have to ask yourself, this is nonsensical. How far back? So I mean, obviously I would have supported the DREAM Act. It's legal immigration, and people from other countries who come here they love America. They love it. They came here by choice. You know, I was born in Kansas City, Missouri. I came here by choice. That doesn't make me not a Floridian, right? It doesn't make me not love it and not care about it.
Yeah, but there were no legal requirements for you to come here, and the argument in many cases is without the documentation, or that they're here illegally and not seeking to gain citizenship, that it strains the economy, it strains the workforce, it's a drain, it is with federal funding programs to take care of those folks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a thorny issue, no question.
If you believe the false argument, which I think is a false argument, that that they made no attempt to do this legally and to stay here legally. But lives are complicated. So, and there's a fear factor in law enforcement issues of immigration. So, I mean, you know, lives are complicated, and people make mistakes in obeying the law all the time. Maybe you sped getting here. So, you know, I mean, you know, people make mistakes all of the time. We should make laws understandable, easy to navigate, and obeyable.
Enforceable, maybe.
And enforceable. Yes.
Dude, I apologize. I'm stuck in traffic. Anyway,
She was speeding. Yes.
I was trying to get there. 2 red lights. Only one. I had to stop for one. Okay. All right.
This is, you know, you're on
Yeah.
tape. So
Yeah.
they will find you.
Didn't run. We've heard from some of the other candidates. I mean, these are the high-end issues that get out to the media, like these questions. But we've also heard from some of the candidates about things like entitlements. We shouldn't have all these special entitlements. And instead, perhaps you have federal money available. This is one side of the comments. Federal money available, so you give it back to the states, like in block grants, and trust the states to funnel it down to the counties, the cities, etc. And the other argument is you shouldn't have any federal involvement in any kind of things that states do, and roads, education, health and welfare. So where do you think we should be with federal money coming back for, like, Title I, other than interstate highways, other than U.S. highways and interstate highways, and, you know, just where do you stand on that issue?
Well, you know, we had Tropical Storm Debbie come through, went all the way across the state and hit Jacksonville.
Mhm.
And 3 bridges collapsed. This is Florida. A tropical storm should be, you know, not a mere afternoon thunder shower, right? We should be that capable of handling a tropical storm. And we weren't. There's sinkholes opened up and bridges collapsed. That tells you, while those bridges served us well, they served us for 50, 70, 80 years. And our country's infrastructure is crumbling. And we can't thrive in a modern 21st century world with crumbling infrastructure. The Congress, the Congresses and the Congresses to follow will have to have these conversations. We'll have to be brave enough again to at least talk about, as Eisenhower did, what our infrastructure is for. It's not just for me to get here for this interview. It is how we live. It is how we prosper. It is how we have commerce in this country. It is called the National Defense Highway System for a reason. So it is also what keeps us safe. So this conversation about federal government involvement in infrastructure and spending on infrastructure as a part of our debt, I see as a ridiculous argument. I see it as a part of our investment in what makes us great. Okay. So obviously the federal government, for me, is its paramount responsibility is keeping us safe. And I believe our highway system and our bridges and our roads do that. I believe locomotion does that. I believe air safety, air traffic does that. So all of those, to me, are non-negotiables, and this idea that we would pass it down to states is insanity.
Okay, let's talk about education money. We have a big bureaucracy of federal education. how should that money be given back to the states, or should it?
Well, again, I reject the premise of your question, because to me, education, first off, is also as every bit as vital to our infrastructure as roads and bridges are. It's also the most economically powerful development tool known to man. And it's also the only key to getting us ahead of this new global economy. We're falling farther and farther behind on every global education scale that matters. And that's not okay. This is the United States of America. As a matter of fact, it was our public education system that made us great, that gave us the middle class, that make all of those immigrants want to come here. So education is paramount. However, I will say that it is broken beyond repair, the way we educate our children. And this Congress and the next 5 or 10 Congresses after that will have to be brave enough to have that conversation about what does a modern education system look like. Why is it bricks and mortar still? Should it be? If it is bricks and mortar, why is it only open during the day? Why aren't schools 24 hours? Real conversations about what does it mean to be a teacher, and how do we train teachers? And do teachers know how powerful they are to the economic health of their community? Do they have any idea that they are the economic drivers in their local communities? I mean, real conversations, not false conversations. If you conjure up in your head school 100 years ago, right? And then conjure up a classroom today, about the only difference is the teacher standing in front of a whiteboard instead of a blackboard now. That's not okay. That's not okay. So I think it's about one of the top 3 for sure most important conversations we as a federal government will have to have.
Okay. And it's not my premise, it's what your opponents are saying on both sides of the issue when the question is asked. You say that education is broken beyond repair. Mm-hmm. Where would you repair it?
So, I have a school to work program. I work with students, and what we do is we help them identify. I did not bring my phone in.
This is mine.
I did not bring my phone in on purpose. So because I have nightmares that happens to me. What we do is we find buried treasure. We find kids who have been overlooked in the school, and then we help them identify who they are and what they're good at and what they might want to do in the world and how they might want to impact the world in their adulthood. And so I'm keenly aware of the disconnect between education and the world of work. So for me, one of the most important things is to have a real conversation about education as an economic development tool. Because if you think about it, you spend 12 years being told, sit down, be quiet, don't stand out, don't work with your neighbor. You go from, you have 45-minute classrooms, right? So you go math 45 minutes, English 45 minutes, whatever. But then all of a sudden you graduate. And employers say, no, we want just the opposite. We want you to work on one project until it's done. We want you to work with a team of people. We want you to share information and knowledge and make each other better for our bottom line. So there's this kind of real big disconnect in how we grow young people and then what we want from adult employees. And I think that's going to be one of the most exciting, interesting things about education reform. And I think it should be the driver for then the rest of the questions as far as literacy and measurements and all of that.
Guess that reads. Oh, did you ask about Medicaid?
Nope, I was going there for going right. I said it there.
Sure,
you asked it.
Nope, you go ahead.
Healthcare, big issue in America. Affordable Care Act, etc. There's others arguing Medicare, Medicaid, unsustainable. You know, shove it down. What are your views on health care in America, particularly in not just healthcare, but you know, Margo talked about entitlements. I think that a lot of folks put these under the entitlement category of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. There's been lots of talk of reform. What are your views on how to reform those?
Well, I think somehow the message got away from us, right? We don't have a healthcare problem in this country. I mean, people come here for our healthcare system. We have the best hospitals in the world. What we have is we have an insurance problem. We have access to that healthcare problem. We also have a preventative problem, right? We are really, really good at treating you once you're already sick, but we're not so good at like helping you make sure you don't get sick. I think it's fascinating that, I mean, it was Richard Nixon who started the Renal Failure Act, right? So it was Richard Nixon who originally started talking about universal health care. It was Ronald Reagan who signed the Emergency Health Care Act, right? So saying it's immoral in America to let you die in an emergency room. That if you get to the emergency room sick, we're saving you. So I think it's healthcare. I'm really just stunned. I've been stunned for 3 years that this conversation has deteriorated to this level. When it could have been, remember in the early days, everybody was there. We had small businesses at the table. We had insurance companies at the table. We had everybody at the table saying something does have to be done. And they blew it. I mean, they just completely and utterly failed the American people.
And so now we have these programs in place that are either apparently unsustainable, can't be sustained over a long period of time, or is being shoved to the states, and the states are screaming uncle. Right. Something's got to happen. It can't continue.
Right.
So what do we do?
Well, you have to elect people who are brave enough to have this conversation. I mean, there's just no other way around it. Back to education, just let's use Medicare and Social Security for an example. There are more baby boomers. I'm a Gen Xer, so there are more baby boomers than Gen Xers, right? There are more Gen Xers than millennials. And I mean, you know, we're getting smaller and smaller. So we better make sure that we're really, really smart and earning a lot of income, because Social Security and Medicare are inverse. So,
and Marcia and I really need that.
I have to pay for you all.
Thank
so
you.
I need to earn some money, and my daughters need to earn money to pay for me. And you know, that's what I mean too about education being such a pivotal part of our economic prosperity and our economic stability over the long haul. What we can't do, come on, let's be realistic. We can't turn our backs on the people who worked their lifetime building America, protecting America, teaching American children, nursing, caring for the sick. These people lived up to their American obligations. And for Congress to think it is acceptable for them not to live up to their obligations is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. That is just not who we are. And at a minimum, you know what? We're to the point where it almost doesn't even matter what the answer is. We need people who will at least have a conversation. I mean, we have 435 people in Congress who won't even speak to each other civilly about real issues that we're facing. I don't know about you, but I would be fired from my job if I just refused to talk about my job. People get fired for not doing their job. People should get fired for not even being willing to talk about doing their job.
But the thing means that we'll go from health, Medicaid to Social Security, which is unsustainable, going broke, not enough coming in, more going out. It's got to be reformed. How do you think it should be reformed?
Well, okay. This is going to be my new coin phrase. I reject the premise of your conversation.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple of times now.
That's
okay.
I'm going to trademark it. Social Security, the Congressional Budget Office came out with a thing saying if these 17 things happen, if these 17 really horrible things happen, then Social Security is going to go broke, right? How about we don't let those 17 horrible things happen? This is completely and totally within Congress's control. This is America. We don't spend our days talking about all the things we can't do. That's not how we run our country. That's not how the people who went out west and plotted their land and made it through horrible Montana winters. It's not how they saw America. And we can't see America as this, and our federal government as this big limiting impediment to our health in the 21st century. That is not helpful to anyone. And I would call it downright un-American.
Should we be raising the debt ceiling?
We elected Congress several times, repeatedly, and a president twice, who decided that there were things that didn't need to be paid for. Big ones, like pharmaceutical drugs, like war. So we are living with those decisions, and to not raise the debt ceiling in a time of war would be catastrophic and utterly irresponsible. You remember there was a time when Americans did whatever it took to rid the world of evil. We rationed our gas, we turned our lights off, the women went to work in factories while the men were away. We rationed our milk for our babies. And to talk about putting America at risk while we're actively pursuing terrorists is irresponsible.
Marcia? Well, I think of more. I have a million. I'm just looking at my stuff.
I have faith in Marcia. She's waiting to give me a zinger at the end, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the discussions that happens over and over and over again are the levels of bureaucracy, the numbers of agencies that some will argue are a part of the issue of the economic decline, that America is not going to develop industry and not going to develop business simply because of the layer upon layer of bureaucracy, regulations, rules, taxes, etc. that are imposed on businesses. And as you speak of the need for America to secure not just new businesses but new industries, how do you see do you see changes needed in American tax structure and bureaucracies, regulations, as it were?
Okay, so let me pull apart. Don't let me forget the taxes.
Okay,
I'll get back to that.
I won't.
Okay, so I don't know. What I know is I've never worked at a place that didn't have a strategic blueprint for success and didn't have a definition of what that success was. You might call it a mission statement, whatever, but every place you work at has a place they're trying to get to. And then that drives everything else, right? That drives who you hire, how much you pay them, whatever, right? What their job duties are. And again, because we have a Congress who is more interested in what attack ads they'll put on in October than having real conversations, We have a Congress who wants to soundbite our way out of this changing economy. I don't know. We have to have a definition of what a modern America success is. Then we have to work backwards and figure out what we need to get there. What regulations do we need? We have regulations that are 150 years old. We have regulations that are from the agrarian society, right? So it's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. But I mean, the counter to that is, right? Several of my opponents, Mr. DeSantis specifically, has said if it starts with department and or ends with agency, I'm ending it. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want to, as a mother, have to ask myself, do I want my child to die of dehydration or dysentery? Because this water is undrinkable. That's not the country I want to live in. That's not the country I want to raise my children in, and their children. I want to bounce healthy little grandbabies on my knee that can drink water right out of the tap. I want to go and buy a Happy Meal and know it's been inspected. So, I mean, ending the federal government is just as nonsensical as, saying that every regulation and every agency is still needed. There's a lot of gray in the middle. These are not simple conversations, and they shouldn't be treated like they are.
Agreed. Tax.
Tax, yes, back to tax. The tax code is fundamentally unfair. The tax code is ridiculously complicated, overly complicated, and I'm not a flat tax person. I happen to believe kind of the other side of it, that you interfere with local governments, with their sales tax, and that it would really be more like 36%. I don't hate the idea of a national sales tax or a flat tax. I just think that the evidence is kind of overwhelming that it wouldn't work, and it would have to be more expensive than champions of it think it would be. But certainly a tiered tax, a simplified tier tax. But again, I think it goes right back to our strategic plan. What's our strategic plan for America in the 21st century? How much is that going to cost? How much do we need taxpayers to invest in getting us there? We kind of we put the cart before the horse on many of those tax issues, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if you have loopholes that you can drive a truck through, something's broken. Something's broken. But you have to, I'll go back to the same comment I closed with on economic prosperity and education and everything else. You have to elect people who are willing to have the conversation.
Anything else from you?
No, I apologize. That was Pete Ellis. I wanted to make sure we convey his regrets for not being here.
Oh, we took it.
Yeah.
I do have one more question that has come up in other interviews, and that is the relationship of various politicians with your foundation and their efforts to secure funding from the tax base to fund the foundation trying to divert money. Could you speak to that? I understand also from that there was no ethical violations, no legal violations. But since it has come up, I thought I would give you the opportunity to speak to that.
So, first off, I encourage you to go to foundationfactcheck.org, which is what we did. We put all of our audits, all of our financials up for public display in one easy location. They were always up because the IRS. There's 990 finders and all kinds of good stuff out there that you can find out about all nonprofits, but the foundation included. I will say, as far as my board membership, I'm thrilled and honored to have people of all political views care about my kids. I'll never apologize for fighting for kids that a lot of other people have given up on, and fighting hard for them. I think it's funny that we elect people in part because they care so much about particular issues or because they're so active in their community, and then we punish them as legislators for caring about those same issues. So the article, what I will say about those 3 articles was, it was the height of irresponsible journalism. The height. And it is shocking that a paper of that caliber would put so much out there without fact-checking any of it, without seeking clarification, without understanding how the process works in Tallahassee. And it was very disappointing and untrue. Untrue, the innuendos that they called journalism. It was bias and I think beneath the code of ethics for journalists.
One of the major questions, of course, was that a foundation that had functioned at or about 1.2 mil was attempting to secure funding in the 40 million, 35 times the normal. So that was one of the bigger questions. But that's just patently untrue.
Oh, okay. If you are talking about the malt liquor legislation. Mm-hmm. We were named twice in that piece of legislation as the recipient of it wasn't a tax increase at all. It was a slice of an existing tax that is meant for education and community development. We were named as the recipient of that slice, which is about, if I remember right, it was 1% of a 6% excise tax. Estimates were that it could be as high as 40 million. But if you read the legislation,